Happy Friday, everybody. Today is the 12th of July, and today's episode is going to be about the collapse of the Democratic Party. And this is in the fallout of the disastrous debate that happened late June. So it's like about almost 2 weeks ago now. There was the debate between Donald Trump, former president, and current president Joe Biden. And it did not go well for Joe Biden. It was right out the gate. It showed what most of us have seen since, or have observed since I want to say about like around 2021, like mid 2021 on, which is that he has significant mental lapses that, one of the most telling, impressing ones is when he said, like, I have one word to describe America, and it's at the foothills of the Himalayas. And he, really has like a very tremendous gaffe. And Kamala Harris is president, and looking at him like, did that just really happen? Like, he tried to say a single word to encapsulate America, and instead said like a whole sentence that he couldn't even get out correctly. And normally, presidents have had like a grace with not being articulate. One that comes to mind is George W. Bush, where he wasn't very articulate. He had lots of gaffes, probably some that were on par with Biden. Most famously, he had the one where he said, like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, and he's trying to think of like shame on me, but he says like fool me can't be fooled again, because he had so many gaffes and so many like stupid things that he said, but they weren't indicative of a person that doesn't know like what's going on. And then like Shane Gillis has this really funny joke where he says like after Biden's done talking at the podium, he turns into a Roomba. He just like starts spinning and doesn't know where he's going, doesn't know how to get off the stage, doesn't know how he got there, and it's actually pretty sad. But in light of the debate, a lot of people started saying like, okay, well, this is the president. He's not all there, and a lot of people, it seems, might have seen that for the first time. Like, they might have like really observed like, okay, he has a really difficult time putting sentences together, keeping a train of thought, and part of the reason might have been because it was just too late for him. But, as president of the United States, like, you have to be on call like 24/7 at all hours of the night, because things don't always happen on East Coast time. Things happen all around the world, and like you have to respond or at least be available or have somebody that, is down the line that you're going to be, delegating those responsibilities to if you're taking a break or if you need, other things like to be, administered to. And that's how things work in the military. Like, okay, well, I'm going to go on lunch, or I'm going to go, like if you're on deployment, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go on lunch, or I'm going to go do this. People expect to know like where they can find you. Even if you're taking a break, when you're in like a government position like that, even if you're just like an E5, like just, managing a work center, like if something breaks or if something happens, they need to be able to find you. So you're kind of like accountable 24/7. And I would imagine that the president is the same, because he's got all these people around him that need to go to him for decisions. And, having somebody that old and that feeble is very concerning. And the Democratic Party is collapsing because I think they underestimate that, a certain percentage of Americans have served in the military, a certain percentage of Americans have high-stress jobs, a certain percentage of Americans have careers where they know, like, hey, the president of the company needs to be available. The president of the company needs to have, an agenda, needs to be articulate, needs to be on top of things. And they can tell a difference when a company or an organization or a military command is not running well, and so I don't want to bash the guy too much. But I think it's kind of sad that he's old and those things are happening to him, and he's got people around him that are pushing him. I wish him the best, and even though like it would be better for the country if he stepped down, and had somebody that could really run the show 24/7 and be able to respond to emergencies efficiently and effectively. It doesn't seem like he's able to do that. It doesn't seem like he's been able to do that for quite some time. And it's sad that it's very indicative of like Rome, when Rome was in its last days of its civilization, where just like anybody was running the show, because the administrative state, the administrative like body, the Praetorian Guard, they had already been like long established and had been leeching off of the system and propping up the status quo and propping up things that were bad for the Roman Republic, but good for the Roman Empire. And that empire just eventually collapsed. And towards the end, you had, Roman emperors that were just, they were just like pretty much just figureheads, just keeping the facade going. And that kind of seems like where we are at now, where, if this guy isn't running the country, then who is? It's certainly not Jill Biden. But anyways, the main thing that this whole debacle has unearthed is the collapse of the Democratic Party. And the reason why the Democratic Party is in collapse is not just because of what happened with Joe Biden, but it's also because they haven't had significant leadership since Bill Clinton was the president. So I want to say last time Bill Clinton was president was from 1992 to 2000. And his heir apparent was Al Gore. Al Gore was defeated in the 2000 election, and after that, his heir apparent was Barack Obama. It wasn't until 2000. It wasn't until 2008 when Obama became president, and then after Obama, you have Trump, and then obviously now Biden. And although I don't really call Barack Obama like a significant leader for the Democratic Party, because he's something different. He's not really like a mainstream Democrat. He presented himself as such in the 2008 election, but by 2012 it became apparent, especially through his administration from 2012 to 2006. 2008 to 2012, that he was way, way more left-leaning and more encompassing of policies and policies that were more indicative of like a socialist or communist type. But the last like real Democrat was Bill Clinton. And although he had his faults, like he was able to work with Republicans and it's not just a matter of like being able to work with like the other side. It's also a matter of like having a policy that reflects the will of the people. And between 1992 and 2000, government, although had its faults, at least in the federal government, it still operated by and large, or at least in the majority kind of sense, by the will of the people. Like they couldn't do too many things that, at least publicly, that were just like blatantly against like the public will. For example, even Bill Clinton was adamantly against the border being open. You ask Bill Clinton today, of course, he's going to go along with the party line of the Democratic Party, which is, the border should be open and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. But at least back then, they couldn't say things or work at odds against the American public's will. Now, post Barack Obama, that ideological mainframe, or like the ideological orthodoxy of the Democratic Party has moved to a point where it no longer reflects the will of the American people. It reflects something completely different. And although some people still have this like nostalgic view, like if you talk to a lot of like older people, like in their 40s, 50s, 60s, even in their 70s, they still have like in their mind this Democratic Party of the Bill Clinton era that doesn't exist anymore. And, you know, you see this a lot with older Latinos, older like Filipino people, where they're like, oh yeah, I used to be a Democrat and I agree with Democrat parties, because they kind of just like associated that with like, you know, I'm for like the people, I'm for fighting poverty and like these kind of like generic, you know, doing good kind of things, like very vague, very loose, kind of like I'm against people being like crazy rich and, you know, just fighting wars and whatnot. It's just a, you know, very baseline, like vague understanding of like what the Democratic Party was, again, between those years of like 1992 to 2000 under Bill Clinton. And again, Bill Clinton's problems are a different episode, but again, he couldn't be for the border being open. Even he couldn't be for, you know, just crime waves and like allowing people to steal up to $1,000 without any, you know, judicial repercussions. Barack Obama changed all that. And that's why I don't really consider him a Democratic president. He morphed the Democratic Party into something completely different. Something more like a communist socialist party. And again, some people still operate under that assumption that this is the Democratic Party of Bill Clinton, while other people acknowledge that it is this new party under that Barack Obama changed between 2008 2012 to 2016. That during those years, 2012 to 2016, that he had changed and radically changed the party to this point of almost like no return. Just like how and then also subsequently during those years, the Republican Party changed dramatically. It changed from a party of, you know, hawkish war to the Tea Party, and then the Tea Party co-opted and then became one with the Republican Party, because they were smart. They were like, well, if we can't create our own party and become acknowledged and, you know, get positions in the government, then we're just going to take over the Republican Party, which, you know, they eventually did, and that's why you have the Trump movement, the MAGA movement. That's how that happened. A lot of people, I think, forget that. But in the wake of the debate and in the 2 weeks that have transpired since then, without a real clear leader that can adhere to and bring people to at least a will of the people type of position, right? So Bill Clinton is different than a Donald Trump, but a Bill Clinton at least accomplishes things that 60-70% of the Americans can be like, yeah, I'm okay with that. You know, 30% will be like, no, I don't really like that. But a good majority of Americans will be like, yeah, that's fine. I'm not crazy about it, but it is what it is. But those days, like I said, those days are gone. And because of that, because the media had lied and propped up this image of Biden to, you know, in a sense of like try to get him across the finish line to the 2024 election, that these people have been completely exposed, probably for the final time, of just the lengths that they will go to conceal the fact that the president is not able to perform his functions of the presidency. And the main problem with the Democrats is that they're standing on like a glass ceiling, and like they're in a glass house throwing rocks, right? Because they're hurling these insults or these accusations at Trump, right? That Trump is this dangerous dictator that is going to take over your democracy. But nothing reeks of subverting democracy more than concealing the fact that the president isn't able to perform his duties, lying about it to the public, and then this whole thing, and they're like, oh, well, Trump refused to step down. You know, they voted against, the public voted against him in 2020, and he refuses to acknowledge. Well, he's not the president anymore. And then the whole party's calling for President Biden to step down, and he doesn't want to step down. So it's like every insult or every accusation that they're hurling at the other side is they're guilty of themselves. That they're like, oh, well, the Russians are colluding with Trump, and you know they even brought this up again. They're like, oh, Putin wants Trump to be the president, but 51 intelligence agents from the United States government were like, yeah, that laptop didn't belong to Hunter. It was not his at all. And then that proved to be false. So they're saying that an intelligence agency in Russia is trying to prop up this guy. Meanwhile, our own intelligence agencies are trying to prop up another guy and got caught doing it. Whereas the other one in Russia is completely false. And again, actually was started here, that they created that dossier here to try to manipulate the public into thinking a certain way. And I'm not even going to get into all the stuff that they did during COVID, you know, to just how tyrannical they acted during that time. But this is a party that has no moral backbone, no clear agenda, no leadership, and relies on propaganda, lies, coercion, a complicit and lapdog media that just does their bidding and lies and obfuscates for them. And something like that, something so abhorrent that is just so much built on a house of straws would of course come down from one bad debate performance. And again, juxtapose that to George W. Bush and his million, I don't know how many gaffes that guy had. Some of them were just awful. But one, they didn't indicate that he had any kind of mishandling or inability to handle the government. And any of these people that are saying like, oh yeah, well, Biden's fine, I'd like to ask those people, would you be comfortable getting into a car with him while he's driving? I guarantee those people would say no. So these people obfuscate and lie professionally. It's their job. It's their job to make the president seem like he's fine when he's not. And of course the only reason why they have to do that is who's behind him. Kamala Harris. But who's behind Kamala Harris? They don't have anybody. There's nobody that they, at this point, can prop up aside from Michelle Obama that would speak to that Clinton era. And that is what they need. They need that Clinton era Democrat back. You know, for 24 years now, they have moved so far away from that they're a party that is just untenable. And I'll leave you guys with that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about this ordeal that's been happening. I think, you know, I'll leave it with this, that I think that they are going to have him go through the election and then have him be on the ballot. That they don't really have a choice at this point. That if he refuses to step down, then he refuses to step down. And they dug their own grave, and it's like divine justice that they would suffer the consequences from their own stupidity. And of course, the country is the one that pays the price for that. All right, but with that, I'll be signing off, and we'll see you guys on next week. Thank you guys for tuning in, and make sure to like, subscribe, and all that if you enjoyed the content, and then we'll see you guys next time.